Today I'm going to talk about introversion. I'll start by telling you my journey through introversion, and then finish by telling you a theory that I'm currently postulating that involves introversion and ASMR. So, let us start at the beginning. When I get to the end, I'll stop. For the latter part of my adolescent years and most of the part of my early adulthood, I believed myself to be an extrovert. Or rather, I very much wanted to be an extrovert. And so I put a great deal of effort into appearing confident and talking and socializing, and probably 2013 and 2014 was the height of my extroversion. I made a special effort to go to parties and to talk to as many people as I could at those parties, and to see and be seen and all of these sorts of things. And I started to really feel like I was getting the hang of it. And then, last spring of 2014, I stopped taking drugs. I have a feeling that my story, my experience with psychiatric drugs will be a recurring theme here at the Primal ASMR channel. So as your first introduction to my story, I'll just give you a brief overview that I was medicated as a teenager, as so many of us in certain cultures have been. And I stayed on those drugs for a long time. And it was last spring that I decided, I think I'm really going to try to stop these now. And I did. After 10 years of taking them. I bring this up because it was shortly after I achieved my sobriety that I began to notice that at parties, I no longer felt compelled to talk to multiple people. In fact, no longer wanted to. I began to cherish alone time more and more. And I began to fear small talk more and more. And at first I was disturbed by these happenings. But then I began to think, my goodness, could I just be an extrovert? I meant to say introvert. But those 10 years on drugs just intoxicated me just enough that I tried to take the path of extroversion, that I thought extroversion was for me, because that's what intoxication is for, right? I mean, cocktail parties, parties where people do drugs. They do drugs to lower their inhibitions, to allow them to associate with one another more freely. Well, psychiatric drugs are also intoxicating, as all drugs are. It's what makes them drugs. And so I began to suspect that it was my constant and low level of inebriation that ever allowed me to think the ridiculous thought that I might be an extrovert. And so now, in my sobriety, I have come to accept called Quiet. Actually, I've misspoken. She didn't lend me the book called Quiet. She told me about the book called Quiet, and I torrented the book, and now it's on my e-reader. So she loaned me the idea. She spread the idea to me. And this book, Quiet, is written by an author named Susan Cain. And her book, I'm not all the way through, but it is discussing, for example, whether or not introversion is inborn or culturally acquired, nature versus nurture. Whether or not introversion is an asset or a drawback. Various topics around introversion. And last night, the chapter that I read was especially interesting to me because it caused me to wonder about people who listen to ASMR. I'll tell you why. The chapter was citing a study in which many infants were brought into a testing environment and they were exposed to stimuli like popping balloons or the sudden appearance of a clown or a stranger or perhaps flashing lights. And it was recorded how these infants responded. After all of the tallies were taken, the infants were placed into two groups. Those that had responded vigorously, the babies who had rapidly moved their limbs and perhaps even vocalized, perhaps even cried at these stimuli. And then the other group of infants, those that were much less responsive, perhaps even nonplussed by the stimuli. And for years, these children were brought back in for further testing. And when they came back as adolescents, they took MRI scans of their brains to see what was happening when they received various stimuli. And it turns out that the high reactive infants all had a more sensitive amygdala. And the amygdala is the name for the part of your brain that is perhaps I don't know if it's the most old part of your brain or just one of the most old parts of your brain, but it's more primal than your frontal cortex. The amygdala is so primal, in fact, that I believe the book said all other mammals have a form of amygdala in their brains as well. It's very old. And it turns out that the babies which had the highest responding amygdalas and reacted the most in the most extreme way to stimuli grew up to be the introverts. And the babies who were more nonplussed about their environments grew up to be extroverts. And so it's been theorized that those of us with more sensitive amygdalas, those of us who experience stimuli more intensely, have a much higher tendency to prefer to live inside our minds as introverts. Think about the kind of person like yourself who listens to ASMR. say. If I didn't like to listen to them, I certainly wouldn't expect anyone else to like to listen to them. So I visited the fabric store